This is Obaid. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is Obaid. I'm really excited to be here. It's always a great privilege and honor to work with PWIC. It's a great initiative, great community, and I'm very humbled and excited to be part of this. So today's session is going to be about guidelines for product roles, and I would be sharing my insights, anything I have experiences, given my background in technology, almost 15 plus years of experience, where I've worked in a variety of different roles involved in product. So just some ground rules or just some instructions. So we have an hour from now, and I will try and use about 40-45 minutes at least for the content, but let's try and make it interactive. So I will take some pauses, and we will take some of your questions related to the content there. If you have other questions, you can hold on to them, and we can address them at the end. Just type out your questions in the private chat, sorry, in the comments, and there are people helping me out here, which is awesome. So we will address those questions. And when you do ask your question, please add some information about yourself. Not too much, just in front of your name. Just add where you work, or if you're a student, how are you a fresh graduate, whatever. So it will help me tailor the answer to the question. Just one more thing, make sure you turn off things, like basically that take up a lot of bandwidth. Things like, Dropbox or Google Docs, Google Drive, those kind of things. So just make sure you do that because they will suck up a lot of bandwidth and obviously stay on mute. So let's get started. All right, so here's the agenda for today. So, it's good to talk about interview tips to help you succeed in an interview for product management, but I think we need to set some context. I do get a lot of questions around, what is product management? How do we get into it? How do we find out about PM roles in Pakistan if we're based here? So, we'll go through an introduction. I think we will find other flavors of product management in Pakistan, just because of the dynamics of the market. So you have to go with the market and present yourselves as like a good fit for the roles that are available, and then you can obviously, with experience, transition into something that interests you or what you're good at. So we'll go through the other roles, and then we'll get to getting to the interview, how you get to the interview, and then some basic guidelines for the interview. I can't go into specifics, obviously, because every interview is different, every organization is different, but we'll go into some sort of best practices. All right. So we'll, roughly spend, 5 to 10 minutes on each of these topics, and get to some questions as well. All right. So, oops. Basically, just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Ubaid. I'm a senior product manager at Poly, Poly.ai. There are a bunch of Polys out there. It's a popular name, but the startup I work at is called, the website is Poly.ai. We're basically in the engagement space, so polls and surveys and workflows for organizations that use Slack and Microsoft Teams. And we're doing well recently because of the full shift to work from home and work from anywhere, and because of that, a lot of work is happening on these platforms. So we're trying to keep up with that demand. I'm based out of Islamabad, as you can see, and we do have a small team here since the start of the year. But most of our the rest of the team is in Seattle and other parts of the U.S. and Canada. Before this, I have worked as a PM. At that time, I worked as a program manager at Microsoft and Amazon, both of those in Seattle. And I have a computer science background. I didn't mention that here, but my undergrad and my graduate degree, master's degree is computer science related. Though I hate coding, so maybe that's one of the reasons I got into product management and program management. But I do enjoy it as well, which I'll get to later, like why, what motivates you to be a PM. Other than that, I've run my own startups, and that's something I'll talk about as well. That's one of the journeys into getting into product. And more recently, before Poly, until last year, I was running and setting up a new business within Telenor. So that's a little bit about myself. Other than that, I think I like to play tennis. I like to read. I like construction. I'm constructing my own house right now, so that's where my PM skills are used on a sort of day-to-day basis, other than work. Okay, so let's start with what product management is, right? Because you will find a lot of definitions. You'll find lots of people saying different things about product. Here's something I really enjoyed based on my own experience. So product management is basically an intersection of many different things. But what are the things that matter, right? So here's the outcomes, right? Here's what you will produce. Let's start with that. So number one, you need to shape the product, right? What does shaping the product mean? It means defining, who the user is, what their problems are, how they're currently solving those problems, and then what you would need to do, what sort of product or experience you would need to give them to solve those problems in an ideal way through your own product, through your own, what you ship. And it's really important to also define what you're not, right? Because I think one of the key skills as a PM is to say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're not doing. Why, right? Is it because it's something that's out of scope? Is it something that we can't get to because we don't have resources? Or is it something that just doesn't make sense as a solution to the user, right? Here's what we need to focus on, here's what we don't need to focus on. And then, obviously you need to get something in the hands of the customer and the user as well, right? Just thinking about what you need to build and so on is fine, but then you need to get something in their hands and get them using it as well. And that's called shipping the product, right? Getting something out the door. We'll talk about this later, but I think one of the key skills as a PM is shipping stuff. So it may not be an ideal solution that you build, but it has to be better than what they're using. And it has to be good enough that they start using your solution and then you iterate off it. So again, shipping something, getting something in the hands of your users is more important than building the perfect product. So I think that's really a key skill, key trait of a PM. And then lastly, like it's a team activity, right? You can't do everything yourself. So it's syncing with the people, and it's not just coordination. It's also a lot of different activities. Like, why does the customer use this? Why does the customer need this solution? Why should we be the ones building this, right? Like maybe you're not ideally suited to build the solution. So from all the way from the start, when you're building something or you're iterating on something you've already built, to working with the team to ship stuff, to talk to customers when they see what you have built, and then actually seeing how they're using it, right? What you've built, is it useful or not, right? So all of those things I think are really important. So this is that intersection, this kind of sweet spot in the middle, this one, that's where the PM lives. That's their core job. And I think it should be very clear in your mind, like, what's the job of a PM before you get into applying or interviewing for these roles. Okay, so there are other flavors of the PM role as well. So while this talk is about product management, I was speaking to the organizers beforehand, right? And I said one of the key issues I see is that the dynamics of the local market is that there's a lot of services work, basically consulting work or software services work, where you have a client, they ask you to build something and you deliver it to them, and then they talk to the customer. That's sort of a typical setup. So you can also call that the software services model, or in short, the services model. Or you have product-based companies, right? So someone like a Facebook or like an Airbnb or Spotify, all of these companies, they're like product companies where they deal directly with the customers, and whatever you build as a product manager over there goes out directly to the customer. There's no layer in the middle. So based on that, basically, I think you will mostly find project management roles in Pakistan. And project management means, basically working with a lot of stakeholders, and it would be focusing more on this part, the syncing part, and the shipping part, right? So this is an important distinction to keep in mind. The shaping of the product also involves talking to customers, looking up customer data, analytics, interviewing people, researching them, working with the UX team, usability, design team. That is something mostly that would happen at the side of your client, right? Because they would have a product manager or someone equivalent on their end, and you would be working with them or the technical team or whoever you would be working with to make sure you ship the product, and that would be more project management. Project management has been around for a while, so from building like the 777 airplane, the Dreamliner, whatever, to like a construction project. So it's not specific to the software domain. It applies to wherever engineering is happening. So you will find a lot of project management related roles globally, and also in Pakistan. So that's just something to keep in mind, and it requires a different sort of skill set that we'll talk to later. So that's one flavor. The other flavor is program management. I have been a program manager at the start of my career when I was just fresh out of my master's degree. So program management is sort of a mixture. It's product and project management combined, if I can just put it that way. So there is some interaction with the customer, possibly. In my case, when I joined Microsoft, way back, like a few years back, at the start of my career, there was a product manager, but that one product manager was for the whole division, right? Basically, at that time, this was way back. Maybe you guys haven't used Windows Vista. This was sort of the Windows Vista timeframe, and I was in Windows Server. So that one product manager had done the research. They had decided what to build, and that had trickled down to our team. I was one of three program managers. There were maybe about 20, 25 engineers. So what we had to build was pretty clear. And we had to take that, like that vision, and then talk to the customers and do some research and talk to the other teams. And it was a lot of like, syncing and coordination and moving things forward and shipping stuff and showing that whatever you ship, show that to the customers, iterate and build on that. And that was a massive project because it was, involving thousands of people as a whole. And it was like a 3, 4, 5-year project. So you will find program managers in larger companies, possibly, where you have, basically a whole kind of scope of responsibilities or a whole big kind of feature set in a product, and then you could slice it vertically by one feature. And that's what I was doing back then, one feature. And then you have a PM kind of work with the product manager and the marketing team and the sales team, and with the obviously the engineering team to ship that one, slice or vertical, whatever feature that is. And then third thing, this is something really interesting. 15 years back when I started my career as a program manager, you have to keep in mind there were no smartphones, there was no social media. There's a lot of these things were new, and product marketing. The example I gave you, like there was one product manager and product like marketing person for that whole sort of division that I mentioned at Microsoft. But now this has changed, right? Like you now find flavors of PMs. In fact, you can argue that one of the core jobs of the product manager is also, it does start with understanding the user, as I've mentioned, but then it's also getting your product in the hands of the user, right? So unless they start, they activate your product, like they start using it, they understand what it's for, they start using it, they develop a habit for using it, your product is useless, right? So that's where the product marketing function comes in. So the acronym is also PM, but I think if you do a quick research, you will find more product marketing manager or product marketing roles or growth related roles than, just product manager roles. So I think if you're starting your career out, this is something really interesting to think about. I'm myself actually learning about this area. I'm taking a training these days, which is really, really interesting for me. So these are some areas, and I think we can pause if you have any questions at the moment. We can take one or two quick ones. Otherwise, I'll keep going. So just shout out in the comments if you have any questions related to the roles. All right, we'll keep going. You can obviously share your questions. You don't have to wait for me to ask, and then we'll keep getting to this. All right, we do have a question, great, from Mazma. So yes, the question is Scrum Master part of this? Yeah, I think Scrum Master. Obviously, for some background, for those who don't know, that's part of the Agile framework, where the Scrum Masters is primarily responsible for breaking the work down into user stories. Making sure what you're working on is organized in the form of a backlog, and then you have all the features or user stories defined, and you pick stuff up that is highest priority, and then you obviously prioritization is a key part, and then you work on the on whatever you can fit out of the backlog into one sprint. So whether it's a 2 week period, 1 week period, whatever, 3 week period, depends on what works for you as a team, an engineering team. So then, that's basically what a Scrum Master is. It can be part of this, yes. I think project management is where that would, be a more natural fit. Now you have more sort of certified sort of Scrum Masters as well. That's something people do. You don't really need a certification necessarily to do that. But it's sort of a designated role within the team. So I've seen setups where the engineering lead, the tech lead, is sort of the project man, is the sort of Scrum Master. Sorry, they're playing that role. In that sort of setup, the product manager would be talking to the customers. If you look at this diagram again, they would be shaping the product, and they would be sort of doing a handoff with the Scrum Master, where the Scrum Master would be then breaking it into stories and doing the execution. But in some places, uh, I've seen the PM also do it. I think a more natural fit for the PM would be the product owner, because the team naturally looks up to the PM to be the voice of the customer, right? They look up to the PM to be talking to the customer, doing the research, and making sure the team knows why they're building what they're building and why it's important for the customer, what the customer thinks about the product. So I would say product owner is more like a fit for a PM if they're a product manager, and if they're a project manager or program manager, the Scrum Master, yes, can be relevant as well. Another question is, what soft skills are common across these or must have? I do have in the agenda something about traits, and that would be soft skills or some of the qualities PM should have. So I'll take that question when we get there, because then I can sort of point out what skills are sort of specific to these flavors. Great questions. Let me keep going in the interest of time. So let's talk about like how you would actually get to being a PM, right? Because I can understand that I've been through this myself. It's a bit of a challenge when you're starting your career out. It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem as a PM, because if you apply for PM roles, they ask for like 2-3 years experience, and if you're new, obviously you don't have that experience. So like, how do you get there, right? If you're interested, and I think one of the other things is, how do you know you want to be a PM, which we'll talk about in another in the slide right after this actually. So there's 4 paths that I can see. One is obviously you're already working in a company, and then you can transition from within that company to a PM role. That's one of the best parts, because once you're inside, you have access to all the roles. As based on my experience in a bigger company, most often the roles can be filled from within the company, right? They do advertise them, but if you are within the company, you do know about the product, the problems, you can network with the hiring manager and talk to them why they should hire you. So I think typical sort of roles that can help you if you're within the company, you can be like an analyst because you're already looking at data, and that way you have a heads up on knowing like what the problems are, what the data says. You could be like a designer, UX person that also has a bit of an intersection with product. You could be in sales, you could be in customer support. At Telenar, we had some of the best PMs come from customer success and customer support because, while we sort of say, hey, you're just on a phone, like talking to people, I think what I really valued about them was that they had actually seen some of the customer complaints firsthand. So they had a lot of knowledge about the product. And basically, they were sometimes even thinking of solutions, and they knew which problem was more acute than the other, right? If you were getting 50 calls a day out of your 100 about network quality and calls dropping, then that's a problem, bigger problem than, let's say, not being able to top up your balance, for example. And even at Poly, I've been there about 9 months now. I do answer customer support requests on intercom. So I mean that's one of the best ways to learn about the product. I've learned a lot through that. The other way is to target a larger company, right? If you look at a larger company, they would have more of a structured program to take on fresh graduates or people with less experience, and then to give them the support they need to grow within a PM role. So that's what happened at Microsoft, for example. I was hired, early on in my career, and they helped me grow, and that I was actually an intern at Microsoft while I was at grad school. And just the number I remember, we had 800 interns that year, right, in Seattle or Redmond, where Microsoft is. So while we don't have companies like that necessarily of that magnitude, that size in Pakistan, you will still find larger companies. So if I just throw some names out there, companies like FMCGs or telcos or banks or these sort of companies now, because they need to keep up and move more towards digitization. They do have structured programs where they hire interns or they hire sort of fresh graduates. The role may not always say product manager. I find that role is harder to find in Pakistan, but you can sort of dig in and look at what the role asks for from the job description, or get some more information from HR or friends that work there. And that's one way of looking at it. Then obviously there are the tech companies. So you have companies, that are part of this hiring, get hired program, which is fantastic that PWIC is undertaking. You can go through that list and see, which ones are hiring for PMs. I haven't taken a deep look at it, but if you have questions, we can go through those. So the larger the company, the better the chance of them, hiring, folks with less experience. And then that's a good sign because you can then ask them about how they will help you grow as a PM, and learn about the discipline. The other way is obviously joining an early stage startup, which has a burning sort of need for a PM. It's easier to get into the PM path through that approach. And I think one of the advantages is that you'll get to do a lot more because, that sort of breadth of sort of features, whatever I mentioned early on, like my own personal example, you'll be doing a lot of that, right? So you'll be doing customer support, you'll be doing design, you'll be maybe writing some code as well. You'll be, working with the leadership team. Maybe you're part of the leadership team. I mean, at a startup, there are very few people initially, so everyone's it's a sort of tight knit group of people. So you have to sort of weigh that with how much focus you want. So obviously, if you're doing like 5 different things in a startup or anything that comes up, over time, you will see like what you need to focus on. So you need to see what stage the startup is at, how fast it's growing, what sort of opportunities will you get as the startup grows to learn and grow yourself, and then obviously dig deep into areas you like, right? So if you like product management, is is the product growing enough? Is the startup growing enough where you can own a whole product area, for example? Um, this is not related to how many people you manage. I think the key thing is how much impact you have, right? So, for example, if you're at Kareem and it's growing so fast that you get to manage the supply side in one of their biggest markets, and what that supplier onboarding, the onboarding of captains looks like, that's huge, right? Because without a great onboarding experience, you will not have enough captains in that city or country, and it's a poor product experience, right, for people who are trying to book a ride. So that's just one example. I know people have done really well at Korean using that example. And then lastly, it's obviously starting your own company, your own startup. That one is trickier. I see a lot of people doing their own startups now, which is awesome. We had less of that back when I was graduating or doing starting out my career. But I think you need to go back to the some of the things I spoke about earlier. Why would you do that? What's the problem? Do you feel passionately about the problem and solving it? How passionate do you feel about that? And then I think those are some of the areas you start off from. Just because you've seen a TV show or read a book and it looks really cool to you, those aren't reasons for starting a startup. Or because your friends are doing it, you think that's something cool to do. And it has to start with what the problem is and how strongly you feel about it. So good. Yeah, I was just about to pause for questions. I think there is one question. Uh, so I have worked in e-commerce from Jawad and customer support for a while, but my passion is product or project management. I have led teams to make services better. All right, which path should I take to get into PM? So I think I will get to a slide after this where I talk about why you should get into product management and why you shouldn't. So that will hopefully help you think about which path is better. It seems like you're talking about product and project management, and first of all, you should be clear which one you're interested in, which one you feel that is a better fit for you, and which one you will enjoy, right? So once you have that clear in your mind, then you can come up with the strategy on how to get into it, right? So let's say if it's product management, then I think you need to have examples of stuff that you've worked on, whether it's from scratch or picking up an existing product, and then basically going through that whole life cycle, right? So you need to be able to give examples of projects or products you've worked on where you have had a significant role, because it's easy when you have a team either reporting to you or you're working in a team environment to say like, hey, we did this. But I think a good interviewer will really zoom in on what did you really do, right? What did you take ownership of? What was your role in all of this? And then how did you make all of this happen, right? So go back to that sort of Venn diagram I showed you. Did you have any influence in defining problems to solve? Did you, what sort of role did you play in getting that ship? How many people did you work with? Did you run into any problems? How did you solve them? And then what was the uptake, or what is the engagement with whatever got shipped, right? So that's something that would help with product management. I think with project management, it's basically maybe less of that interaction with customers, maybe less data, insights and analytics, all of that. It's more about day in, day out, just working with a bunch of people. Scope of the projects would be important. How critical was the project to the success of your company? And then, for improving business objectives, I think that's something that's really important to understand. There's business objectives, which is something that is required to get your company to succeed. If your company doesn't do well, you won't have a job, right? But then at the same time, what about customer engagement, right? Because if customers are facing an issue, they need to you need to solve it for them, and then obviously there's not one issue. There's dozens of hundreds of issues. How do you prioritize? Which ones do you work on? Because there is an opportunity cost at a startup at least, even at larger companies actually, because you can't work on everything. So what you work on, how does that help both with customer experience and the business objectives? And then what you don't work on, obviously that has an impact as well. For the project management side, I'd say it would be less of this sort of prioritization, less of this customer interaction, and more of just day in day out working with different people, shipping stuff, and then partnering with the product teams to make this happen as well. So I think this is a good segue to go into like why become a PM, right? So I didn't come up with these while doing research for this. This guy Lenny Rajitsky, I saw his blog, and this is something that's come up in the training I'm taking to. So this is a very good source. I would recommend. I have some links in the deck to go through this. So I won't go through all of these, but you'll see a theme in these, right? So becoming a product manager, become a product manager if you feel strongly about solving people's problems, right? If you're driving on the road or going on the road and you see a bunch of like school kids, small girls, small boys walking to school every day, and then you feel like, why is this happening? How can I solve this, right? I must do something about it. So either you can do your own startup, or you can look up Kareem and say, hey Kareem, you have a Kareem bus product. I think I want to solve this problem, and I want to make sure Kareem, I think Kareem can solve this problem. Here's how, right? So this is sort of a real example. I think it's a real product, though I don't know much more details, but I'm just giving you an example. And then, like I said, solving problems is fine, but I think one of the key things you need to have as a product manager is also align that with the business goals, right? Because if your business isn't growing, you won't be making money, and it's not sustainable, right? So you won't have a job, and the business will not be sustainable. And the other thing I think you'll see through this is point number 3, and point number 7. All of these, both these things, you have to be sort of an extrovert. If you're an introvert and you don't like talking to people, you don't like answering their questions, you don't like to be seen, you're like hiding in your closet somewhere writing code, whatever, then being a PM is not for you. So you have to be working with a variety of people. There are ups and downs, because when you work with people, there are different types of people, and you don't know, some of them could be having a good day, someone could be having a bad day. So you have to work with them day in, day out, whatever is happening with them, and whatever flavor of personality they are. And then you have to basically have some sort of strategy for doing it, because there's so much happening in your life as a PM, like tons of things happening, you're multitasking. You need to have a strategy, right? So there needs to be some consistency, something you can turn to day in, day out and say, okay, this is the strategy. And that's not just important for you, that's important for your team as well. Because when they're in the trenches working and delivering what is decided, they need to look to you as a rock of stability. And they can always turn to you and ask, say, hey, what's the plan here? Or you have some sort of, something up on Confluence or whatever, some Word doc, which is the strategy, which is the plan, right? So having a strategy is there, and then you need to get stuff done also. You can't just be talking about it and just talking to people. In the end, what matters is getting product and features in the hand of customers. So I think getting stuff done is a really important problem, like a skill to have. If you're not currently a product manager, I think one of the things, this is a really important skill that you can demonstrate from real life as well, right? So for example, if you're in college and you're responsible for arranging certain events, right? And that's not a trivial thing, right? If you're arranging the career fair or whatever event is happening, if you're the key person making that happen, I mean, that's a good example. What problems did you run into? How did you make it happen? How did you make it happen in these circumstances where everything is online, whatever? So that's important. Number six is super important because one of the things that I think people assume about being a product manager is you get to tell others like what to do, and that's not really true. Uh, Being a PM is pretty lonely. I've experienced it. You don't have people reporting to you. Even right now, for example, I'm a PM. I'm a senior PM. I don't have a team reporting to me. But you do have to still get stuff done, and you have to get it done through influence, not by ordering them around, not by authority. And we'll get into that a bit more later. But I think it's important for your team to understand why they're working on something, why this is important for a problem to solve for the customer, why it's important for the business, how it relates to the vision, the strategy, all of that. Communication is really important. Number seven, like communicating more is better than communicating less. And you have to be really clear in your communication, and that basically builds trust in the team. Everyone is aligned, they're working on the right things. So I think that's a key skill for PM, both written and verbal communication. And in these days, using the tools you have very effectively. So using, if your team is on Slack or whatever, using that effectively. With me, the engineers I work with are also like 12 hours behind. So I use video very effectively. I use async communication, something like Loom, LOOM, where when I record, whatever I worked on during the day, like if I have a spec, I'll use Loom to explain stuff to them. Because we may not be able to meet every night, but I share that with them. And that's something that's pretty useful. Number eight, you got to make calls. You've got to make decisions. You can't just keep thinking about stuff. So again, combining number eight with some of the other stuff with number four and number seven. Make a decision, explain why, some of the logic behind it, and then make sure the team is on board and you lock that decision, and then move forward. Right. One of the things the team hates, people hate, is just like constant discussion about something. It's better to make a call and move forward. Right. And then number nine is really interesting because if you're in a product role, obviously you have people using your product. And I think one of the things that should really motivate you in this sort of role is that sort of really amazing experience or experiences you can set up for those customers, right? So at Poly, one of the key things that really motivated me, like when the COVID crisis happened, we had a lot of people, our customers, suddenly, like overnight, globally, the whole pattern shifted, right? Everyone was at work. Now they're all working from home. So we launched like a social engagement feature. So we launched some product features such as games. You can play games with your team members. You can do pulse surveys. You can share with your colleagues and your HR department how you're feeling mentally, physically. So that was really awesome, personally, on a personal level, because I felt we made a difference. So that's something that should really be motivating you. And then yeah, number 10, I don't need to go into. Obviously, you need to be very organized. Don't leave out any details, and obviously always have to be prepared. You can't go into meetings and into your day not knowing what you're working on, and without being prepared. So you have to be really organized. All right. And then I think it's also important to talk about, why you shouldn't become a PM, right? So again, you can see like the last three, those are together. Those are, I've already spoken about those. If you're an introvert, then this isn't for you, right? Because, basically, core skill of being a PM is talking to people and maybe not always enjoying it, but doing it in a professional manner and staying focused, right? And then the other thing, I'm just kind of, not doing these in order, just things that stand out. I'm going through them. Um, if you're doing your job well, everyone won't like you, right? Because you're making hard calls, you're staying focused on what the customer wants. And if you're focused on everyone liking you, that's the wrong objective. Your objective is not to make everybody like you. You shouldn't be in this role if that's what you like doing. So you will have someone hitting you and not liking you. That's normal. Obviously, that should stay focused within the professional sphere of things. If someone hates you and there's nasty stuff happening to you, that you should talk to someone about that. My goal isn't that like you shouldn't be in a caustic or really bad work environment. I worked in environments where people didn't like me, but what we discussed or what I said they didn't like, but that stayed within the room. And then, we're like, okay, this is what we're deciding. Let's move forward, right? So, that's something that's important to understand. Uh, the other thing I'll link to number four here is that it's also number four is also linked to the influence thing I said. You won't always be right, right? So you have to be aware, self-aware that what you're talking about and the sort of feedback you're getting from others, like you have to realize what others are saying and if there's a better solution out there. So if you're not always right, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing because that means you've uncovered a better solution. So you have to pick that up and then make sure everybody understands why that's a better solution and, move forward. And that's linked to having your way, I think. So number two and number four are basically linked. And I think appreciation is something that's important. If you are primarily sort of motivated by people always appreciating you, then this isn't for you because there's good days and there are bad days. You will hear from customers, you will hear from your team members where things didn't go well or according to plan. And you got to filter that. You got to pick yourself up and move forward. Absorb what happened and see how you can improve the product. Right. We in my startup, for example, I'll give you an example. We had built a new product which was used by a very big customer retailer in the UK. And I remember I was like at a dinner, and then we had the client call me, and he's like, "I'll sue you. I'll make sure you never survive, whatever." And that's tough, right? As a startup, it's a really big company. I was like, just a small startup, three people, four people, and I could basically have just said, okay, this is the end. I'm gonna get sued, whatever. But basically, he was a customer, and they were having a bad day. They were venting, and we just made sure we solved their problem. We have, understood what their problem was. I think it was mostly them thinking that the product we had promised them was running late. Wasn't really that bad, and I think the next day we shipped whatever we had promised them, and he was fine, happy the next day, right? So you won't always be appreciated, and that does happen as a PM. You got to have thick skin. So I wouldn't go through everything, but I think I covered the ones that I really feel were important. All right, so uh, just a quick pause here. Any questions so far? Any other questions on why you think you should be a PM and not a PM? And speaking specifically about product roles at the moment. Though. Okay, we'll keep going. I think I'm running slightly late, so I'll keep going. So getting to the interview itself, right? This is really, really important. So hopefully now, like some of the other stuff I've covered is more like general, like, why be a PM and the flavors and so on. But before you get to the interview, I think one of the key things you should be doing is research. I've split this by product company versus more like software services. So let's talk about product companies first. There are two basic flavors of product companies. One is like a B2C company. So someone like, a Spotify or like, Facebook or Instagram, whatever, they work directly with the consumers. So look at the product, look at the areas that need improvement. If you can, try and find out, which particular area, or what the scope of responsibilities are for this product management role, right? That way you can do general research, but then you can really dig into that particular feature. So if it's something like, the mobile app for Kareem, for example, then you can, as a consumer, you can test that out, right? You can take a bunch of rides. You can, try out the different ways of booking a ride through the call center, through the app, whatever, right? Different ways. And then it's not that expensive to take like 5 rides, 10 rides if you're not already using the product. And just like put your thinking hat on, right? Think about just deconstruct that experience. Be more aware, because if you're using it as a customer, it's different. If you're using it as someone who will potentially be working on the product, it's different, right? So one of the things that people appreciate is you doing that research and then having that sort of fresh eye. When you're already working on product, you get sort of insulated, you get numb, basically. You're just thinking about the same thing every day. So as a customer, do your research, and that's something that the interviewer or the company will appreciate. Same thing on the B2B side. Again, this is possible. Let's say you're working with a company that's digitizing the whole supply chain side for small shop owners, right? So small shop owner would be purchasing, a lot of inventory. They would be purchasing, biscuits and tea and like, perishable products and non-perishable products, whatever, right? And if your startup is, working on digitizing that, then talk to people who would possibly be working with them. Like, talk to folks that on the transport side, talk to people on the supply side, different suppliers of products, those FMCGs, whatever. Try and do some research, like who the customers are of that B2B company, and see what their pain points are, and do the research. Also, there's a lot of information available, so check the news. Typical things to look for, or interesting things to look for in the news cycle. You know, look in the news specifically. Look for any pieces of information around growth. Are they raising a new round of funding? If they're already well funded, what does their revenue look like? What does their customer growth look like? Are they facing any issues? Check on Twitter on customer complaints, those sort of things. You can also look for reviews. You have reviews on Google, on Yelp in the US, other platforms. You can see what people are saying. So do that sort of research. If it's a project-based / services company, do research, like how many jobs have they posted, what sort of areas they're hiring for historically. Set up alerts so you get those alerts whenever they post like a new role. So if someone's sorry, for example, hiring a lot of like web developers, right? So try and dig in, see like why are they doing that? Does that mean they're building a lot of dashboards? Do they have clients who have their own backend and they're asking for the work to just be like web-based work? And that should any research you can do will help you, because that will also be a filter, like should you be applying there or not, right? Like if you want to be exposed to the whole technology stack, back end, front end, the cloud, databases, UX, whatever, but the company is only like hiring a lot of web developers, then like that's something to ask the HR or interviewer, like why is it that you're mostly hiring web developers, right? So this something to dig into. And last thing, I think this actually applies for both type of roles. I put it in the project-based thing, but do a lot of networking. So I get a lot of emails and like messages like from people like, hey, would you recommend me for this role or whatever? And I don't even know them, maybe they're just paying me, and I'm fine talking to them. But you can't really do a referral until you know the person, right? Like if I don't even know you, I don't know what you're good at, what you're passionate about, what you're not that passionate about. How can I do a referral, right? So that's just a very basic thing. As someone who hires people, I'll share that with you. It's what I mean by networking is, build a list of companies or type of roles you're interested in. Find people who are, within your network or even outside of your network that work there, and then just, stay in touch with them, right? I used to grab a lot of coffees with people. Now, obviously, it's harder to do that, but just do like a quick sync with them every month, like just 10 minutes. Also see if you can help them in any way, because it shouldn't just be one way. And ask them if they need help with anything, and you can just do that in your own free time and your research, anything you can help them with. So that way it'll be a two-way street, and then the person you're talking to will feel that it's not just someone who's always asking. See if you can help them with stuff. And that way, uh, if you're in touch with people and something pops up, number one, you can always say, keep them updated, like, hey, this is the type of roles I'm looking at. This is currently what I'm studying, or this is the work I'm doing. This is what I'm passionate about, but this is sort of what I'm looking to do next in my career. That's a better way for them to know what interests you than for you to make it very transactional and say, hey, can you just help me land a job like this job? That's a better way of staying in touch. And obviously, if something comes up in their company, then you can always say, like, hey, I'm excited about this area. I see this role in your company or your team. And what do you think? Like, do you think I'm a good fit? Do you feel comfortable helping me sort of apply for this role? That's a better way of trying to get an interview through networking. And then, yeah, referrals are the best way to do it. So I already kind of just covered this last point. A lot of roles are referral based. Like people prefer, even if someone's sort of an average candidate, but they're being referred by a very strong internal champion, then that gives you a boost, right? And referrals happen, before like sometimes the job is opened up on the web. It's advertised, so referrals are usually the best way to land roles. I have another question, two questions actually. Let's talk about them before I move on. So it's a common concept that viable career path for, I'm assuming, software quality analyst is project management. Uh, so what's your opinion? So I think QA is also one of the paths. I forgot about that earlier because in QA, you're going through issues in the product. You're triaging them. You're seeing which ones are important and which ones aren't. Which ones have more impact on the customer, and that's a great way to learn about the product as well. I think that by itself is a great career. So it depends on what you're interested in. If you enjoy going through the product, finding out what's wrong, and how that can be fixed, and working with different team members to make that happen, whether it's product or engineering or others, that itself is a good career path. So I think it's really up to you what you enjoy doing. I have lots of friends who after 10, 15 years even stayed within QA, right? Because somehow the perception in Pakistan, I feel, is that that's not like the respectable or sort of a profession that's at par with engineering or product. But I disagree. So I think what you really need to look for is what interests you, and then is there a growth path within QA within your org. I've seen people from QA go to UX. I've seen them go into product. But that's because they feel that's the next natural step for them growth wise. So that's really up to you. In terms of background, education background, I've seen, at least abroad, I've seen all sorts of backgrounds, right? I've seen people with like English majors and like philosophy majors, AI, different maths, whatever, statistics, different backgrounds. Um, I don't think it's necessary or a prereq for you to have like a technical background in computer science or engineering. Uh, I think it's really like all the skills I've mentioned, having those, right? And I think locally, though, I think people prefer, maybe the bias here is more towards like having an engineering background, uh, like computer science, electrical engineering, those sort of backgrounds. So, you can sort of do research and see on LinkedIn, you can search for product roles and see what sort of backgrounds people have. That's possible. Though if someone is saying, that an engineering background is a prereq, I would see that as a red flag, right, in that organization. So that's something to ask, why that's necessary. Because from my point of view, if you have all the other skills, um, maybe you know how to code, maybe you don't. That's not necessary for a PM. But I mean, I would say that having any sort of degree, as long as you have the other skills, is fine. You don't need a specific degree to be a PM. All right, let's keep going. You can great questions. Keep them coming, please. Um, I'll keep going with. We have about 4 slides left, so I'll try and cover these quickly. Um, in terms of the preparation, no, like I've already covered this, so I won't go into lots of these things. But know the company, know the role and the product. Some questions that you should really be asking. You may not get all the answers to these, but you can ask this of the person you're interviewing or HR, whatever. Make sure you can, think this way. Does the product have users? Because that will tell you what stage it's at. Is it really pre-market? Like they're building something, but there's no users. If it does have users, that's different. How many do they have a funnel established where you have people coming in, they're trying the product, using it, paying for it. Think of that. How real is the problem they're solving? You know, uh, you know, that's something I think really important to think about these days, right? Where you have a lot of hype, lots of startups, lots of tech companies, but if the problem is real and it will persist, then that's a better space to be in. What sort of expected user outcomes are there? What sort of user behavior are you looking to change? What are the business objectives? Are they profitable? Are they, excuse me, not profitable? How much revenue do they have? How much money do they have in the bank? Typically, people don't ask these questions, but these are important things at least to try and get to, so you know what you're getting into. You don't want to be in a startup that's going to shut down in like 1 month, and you have to go through this whole process again, or even a large company that's in trouble, right? So these are good questions to ask. Then I think it gets to like what you're getting to work on. So the product that you're applying for, how does it fit in the vision and the strategy of the company, right? That's really important. It's, I think, maybe okay to work on a small piece of product as long as it's really, really core to the vision of the company. The example I gave you earlier about onboarding captains, uh, in Kareem, like on the supply side, that's really a core sort of product experience, right? We don't have like self-driven cars coming anytime soon, at least not in the next 3 to 5 years. So you will need captains, and unless that's there, the product won't really work. So that's like an example of something that's really key to the vision and strategy of the company. If you're working on something that's really really new, the bus example I gave you earlier, okay, it's a really good problem to solve, but how many people are going to take buses? Is it a sustainable business objective? Is it something that's an experiment for the company, or is it something they're pretty sure they're going to do? Those are questions that are good to ask. And then ask about the team. Is there an existing team? Is it a new team? If it's an existing team, it's fair to maybe sometimes ask if you can talk to other members of the team. Are they going to be part of the interview loop? Because it's good to get other data points, right? Other than the one interviewer. So at Poly, for example, the whole pretty much team that you're going to be working on, they're part of the interview loop. So you get a chance to ask them about how you'll be working with them and the process and so on. This I've already covered, talking to users of the product, experiencing it yourself, so I won't go into that. One of the key things I want to mention here on this slide is number 3. So think of yourself as a product too, right? And I haven't put this here, but one of the recent good books I mentioned is by Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn. And the book is called The Startup of You. So think of yourself as a product, and think of your, I wouldn't say user, but think of your employers and the relationship you have with them. They would have business goals and, sort of goals for you when they hire you in this role. So also think of like what you will get out of the relationship. If you help them launch a new product or a new feature or a bunch of those in the next, like, let's say 1, 2, 3 years, how will you grow as a product, right? What are the key skills you will pick up? What new things you will learn? Maybe you'll know about what areas you like, you don't like. How will you become more employable? Because whatever is next in your career journey within the same company, other companies, how will this role help you with that? So that's the win-win scenario I mean here. Think of that intersection, what the company wants and what you want. Think of that. Do research on the employer, what the culture is like. Go to things like Glassdoor, other such apps out there. If possible, talk to other employees over there. See what the culture is like. Environments that are bad. You should be able to see by talking to people. And then ones that are good, I think again it should be clear. So do your research, and you can ask these questions in the interview as well. Now, I think quickly I want to get through some of the key traits and habits. I know we're slightly over time, but I think I just need maybe 5 to 10 minutes more. So just let me know. I'm okay going over. But if you need me to kind of rush through things, let me know as well. I'm assuming the deck will be shared afterwards, so you will have access to all of these things, and you can ask questions offline as well later on. Cool. So, so problem solving and creativity, this is really important as a key trait. I'll give you one example that I used. So I like building stuff. As I mentioned, I built. I used help locally to build out like this pizza oven. It was like a brick pizza oven here in Islamabad, and I remember when I applied to Microsoft, the final interview. There were like 8 interviews at Microsoft, 8 hours. So make sure you're ready. I'll talk about that somewhere. Make sure you're energized, ready. I used to have my Snickers and my Gatorade because 8 hours is a lot. So the example I gave was, sorry, it was the last interview with the director of the whole group, and he was like, "Have you ever built anything?" I was like, "I didn't build it myself, but a couple of years back, I built like a wood-fired oven, like for making pizza." So I got designs of the internet. I built like the 3D model, and then I worked with basically laborers here who are not educated, but they're very very talented, and we got stuff done, and it was awesome. So he really loved that example because in a non-ideal situation where I didn't have the skill, I used a team to make that happen, and I didn't have a lot of like work experience. I was pretty fresh, so he was like, okay, that's a great example. Communication, again, I've mentioned it. You should be very, very clear. Don't ramble on. Keep things to the point. Use bullet points. Use data to back things up. Be very clear when you communicate. Getting stuff done. This is really, really key. I've already covered this before, so I won't go into details. But can you finish what you started? Like people hate like a PM who's got like 10 things going on. They're all sort of all over the place. Nothing is finished. So you got to prioritize stuff. You should be able to say these are the 10 things I'm working on. 3 are like must win. Then we must do them. The other 5 are like nice to have. And that's a way of communicating as well, right? Maybe the things that are must have, you got those wrong, and you can like if you've communicated that, you will be aligning with the team members. Leading without authority, already I covered that, so I'm not going to go through that. And 4 more. Okay, so using data is really important. So if you're, you should be able to demonstrate this well in your interview. There's 2 types of data. One is obviously from existing customers. If you're working on something that's already out there, you have people using it, you should be analyzing that, like how your product is being used. Are you able to engage with your users? How many are coming back? So basic stuff like cohort analysis. I mean, there's whole areas like to go through just for this, but make sure what your retention, activation, engagement is for what your customers are using already. If it's not launched yet, it's something new, then again, that's different because you need to go out and use public sources of data and to show like what's needed, what's not needed, and frame the problem. Being passionate is very important. Even if, at least you got to fake it. This one, I remember when I applied to Amazon, there were 2 teams, again, 8 hours of interviews, 4 per team. And during the interview, I think with one of them, I think it was like a way to download games online. This was like a while back. So even then, Amazon was thinking of that online game downloads. And I made sure, like, I told them how passionate I was about gaming and why this was solving a problem. And I was like super passionate. Maybe I'd had too much coffee, whatever. But the guy, like, he paused the interview, the hiring manager actually. He's like, I'll make sure I make a note. You're like very passionate. So this is important because building stuff is not easy. You're in the trenches, you have dark days, things aren't going according to plan. So if the PM isn't passionate, then who will be, right? Like you're the beacon. The whole team is looking to you to drive things forward, to keep things positive, focused, and all of that. So you have to be very passionate. You shouldn't just be like, another day at work and like that. Empathy, number seven, is super important. You need to be able to understand things from the customer standpoint and then from the standpoint of your team members, what they're going through, why they're saying what they're saying, what the trade offs are, all of those things. So, empathy is super important. And lastly, just keep things simple because as a PM, I go through this as well. If you're creative, you can think of like 10 things to add to the product and all the cool things you can do. But in the end, what you need to do is if there's a tough problem, how you can really simplify it, look for the simplest and most elegant solution, and then knowing what you shouldn't be doing and what you should be doing. So I think that's where the simplicity comes in. So I think I'll take a pause here because we do want to take some more questions. I'll leave the slide here. This is the last slide. And I think these things are pretty self-explanatory, especially like these days with the way interviews are being done. I guess in Pakistan, they're more kind of in person again, but they could be virtual. And I'll leave it here. But any questions? Because we want to make sure we have some time. There have been great questions so far, but any more? Yeah, I think I clicked on this. Maybe I covered this one until another question comes up. Soft skills that are common across these. So I think the traits that I covered, those would cover the soft skills, Mazma. Let me know if you want me to go into more details on the soft skills. While I just kind of wait and see if there are questions, one of the things I would really encourage you is to go through this. This generally this blog. I already mentioned this by Lenny, but this particular post, like when you get access to the deck, click on it because it does have a lot of information in it. I've taken these two things from there, but there's a bunch of other stuff in there as well. Other blog posts, other authors, and that sort of thing. All right, so good question. I do get this a lot. Can you become a PM right out of graduation, or is there a path you take before? So I think if I go back to the four paths, right, let's structure this in that context here. So as I said, like, most companies looking for a PM role need some experience, right? And for them, it's a risk because if you think from the company standpoint, a PM is probably the most difficult person to onboard. Like it, not difficult, but it requires the most investment from the company. Like it takes like 4 to 6 months just to kind of onboard a PM, right? Because there's so many things, all the people you'll work with, the areas of the product, whatever. So I'm not saying it always takes that long, but it can take that long. So if you think from the perspective of the company, there's a lot of risk involved from their end. So they want to look for some demonstrable proof that you can be good at this, right? That's why they need the experience, not because it's just a requirement. That's why it's there. So you got to have a strategy after graduation or before graduation on how you can get to being a PM, right? So again, start looking for ancillary roles or roles that will help you get to the PM path that require less experience, right? So I already mentioned some of those. So design, usability, QA, engineering. If there's an engineer who's got empathy, who communicates well, and can talk to customers, believe me, that stands out. Not every engineer is good at that or wants to even do that. Most engineers are like happy writing code and they're like, don't bug me. So I mean, in any of these roles, if you have some of the other skills you need to be a PM, uh, it will your company will notice, and then build on the other things that you're weak at, right? Being organized doesn't come naturally. Being able to look at data, obviously you need to have access to good data to be able to go through it, right? So those are things that you build up. So I would say, if you're about to graduate or have just graduated, I think transferring, like looking for a role that 2, 3, whatever years down the road can help you transfer within the company. That's a good path to have. Finding a more junior role at a larger company, that's the viable path. So those are both viable paths. Think of it like a journey and not like an immediate thing. So I'll just say like a race and not a sprint. So what is the path that helps you? There's no ideal path. The path has to work for you. So look at the company, which company is growing, which does have a lot of product roles. So if you start off in some other role or a more junior role, that shows that in that company you can have growth and you can get to a product role within a couple of years. That's a good target to have. Or there's the startup path, right? There are startups even in these circumstances that are popping up, solving real problems. See what sort of help they need, what sort of trade-offs you need to make, like, because obviously startups can't pay you very well. Are they giving you equity? Are they giving you a lot of responsibility? Those are good trade-offs to make against like not getting paid that well, for example, right? Are they solving a real problem? So I would say think of it like a journey and a relay race. Then immediately looking for like, hey, uh, let me just go for like a product role. That will limit the number of options you have, and obviously that will be more competitive as well. So think of it that way. That would be my answer. All right. So I think, um, yeah, I think this has been an awesome session. Really enjoyed it. And if you have any more questions, I do run a product management community as well. Not very active. So if you want to help me make it more active, that would be awesome. So just reach out. I'll share my email and my details with Baham and BWIC. That would be one other way of staying engaged. We have about 50, 60 PMs or people interested in being PMs from mostly Pakistan, but all over the world actually. So reach out. The deck will be shared with you. Hopefully, this was useful for you, and good luck. Thank you.